Hey, it's Mizzy, and I'm a mixed girl in a mixed up world. I have a special guest today. His name is Jonathan Walker. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm excellent. Doing well.
Good, good. Why don't you tell me about yourself?
Okay, sure. Sorry, I was putting my phone on Do Not Disturb because that seemed like a good idea. Um,
That's okay.
okay. So I'm 37 years old. I am, let's see. Well, okay, it's career-wise, I worked for the IRS for like 15 years. Recently, we parted ways, and I'm studying right now to become a real estate agent, I guess, real estate
Nice.
professional. Um, yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in software engineering. Information systems is my background and what I studied most of my life. Yeah, I don't know exactly what more you want. I mean, I could talk about me for an hour, but we won't, I'm sure.
Well, I'll ask you more questions.
Okay,
So we live in New Hampshire, but
I do.
you're from Atlanta, right?
I am.
And what brought you up to New Hampshire?
Work. So it was like 2011, post real estate bubble kind of world where bubble popping depression, whatever you want to call it. And they were reorganizing at the IRS, and they were eliminating jobs that did what I did there at the time. And it just wasn't a great time to be in the employment market. So I got the opportunity to move up here for work, and I did.
So why don't you tell me about your family, your parents?
Okay, so my parents have been married about 40 years. My mother is Sri Lankan, but immigrated to England and lived in London for most of her youth when she was a child, and then moved out to California, where she met my dad,
Nice.
who is an African American male from Savannah, Georgia, roughly. And they got married. They had my older sister. They had me, and then they decided they wanted to be closer to the family, and the closest family was my dad. So we moved to Atlanta,
Nice.
where I grew up. I moved there when I was around 2, and I lived there until I was in my mid-20s when I moved up here.
Nice. Tell me the biggest difference of living. Like, what was the biggest culture shock when you moved to New Hampshire from Atlanta?
Well, so I initially moved to Massachusetts, like the North Shore of Massachusetts. And because like I had done like a job swap, and I kind of like a lady whose job I had taken so she could take my retirement benefits, like let me rent a room for her until I like found my own apartment.
Yeah.
And I was kind of looking around the North Shore area, and I decided to move to New Hampshire because of the cost of living, and also because it kind of reminded me of Georgia a little bit.
Oh, really?
Like the amount of green space.
Yeah.
I'm used to, because like when you cross over the border, like it literally feels different,
Yeah.
with the amount of like trees and nature. And then kind of the same, as far as the people, like culturally, like that whole, okay, so affectionately, I call New Hampshire like a redneck state. And that's where I come from. Like Atlanta is like this oasis of progressive, liberal, you know, ideology, people, philosophies, whatever, and this sea of red and
Yeah.
conservatism and lack of diversity culturally. So New Hampshire kind of reminded me a lot of home. It felt like home, like culturally, the people. So yeah, I gravitated more towards it for those reasons. I mean, there was still culture shock, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I moved to New Hampshire because of the familiarity that I have with the people here, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, because I've flown into Atlanta, so I've only been at the airport. I've never been to Atlanta, which I really want to go to. I'm a huge Dr.
So the
King.
airport is like a city, man. Like the
Yeah.
airport in Atlanta, it has its own zip code. Like
Yeah.
it's its own little world. It's crazy.
I had to go from one side of the airport to the other to catch my plane, and I'm an asthmatic, and I was like, "What? They're trying to kill me!" I was like, "This is insane."
It's a hike. It's huge. It's huge.
But I've always wanted to visit Atlanta. As I was going to say, is I'm a huge, as Dr. King fan. I've always wanted to go visit that aspect of Atlanta, and I'm a huge Walking Dead fan, and I've always wanted to go see the Walking Dead stuff down there. And just Atlanta anyway, because it seems like a cool vibe. You know, I have a friend that lived there too.
Atlanta's interesting because it's such a large metropolitan area. It's an international city. And like, it's literally like whatever you want it to be. Like if you want to live like in a very densely urban populated area, like you can. If you want to live in a place where like there aren't street lights because it's kind of rural and there's like cows and stuff, like you can still live in the metropolitan area and be in Atlanta. Like it's very different in culture because of like the actual landscape and the topology, and like it's a sprawling city. It's not like New England, which is like highlights the cultural differences you were talking about, where like I live in Manchester, New Hampshire, right? Like geographically, if Boston was the center of Atlanta, in Manchester, New Hampshire, I would still be considered living in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Like that's how big, you know, area wise the city is. So yeah, there's that difference. So like I grew up on the east side of Atlanta in DeKalb County. Big ups DeKalb County. I don't know if anybody's paying attention, but like where I came from just changed the country. But anyway, yeah, like I grew up in DeKalb County, east side of Atlanta, the unincorporated part of Decatur, in a very interesting place in the world to be an African American. Like the east side of Atlanta has, at least at one point, I don't know if it's still true because I haven't looked at the statistics in a while, but like the most affluent African American community in the nation. Wow. So like I grew up in a place where if I wanted to, I could go all day without seeing anybody that wasn't Black. Like, I mean, school, I mean, like a doctor, a lawyer, you know, a banker, like any kind of profession. Like there is a large community of Black people who like are professionals and have like money and like nice homes, and like it's and like I grew up thinking that's what the world was like in some respects. And then I came to a different area of the world where minorities tend to cluster in much smaller communities where it's not like that in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So it's different for sure.
Do you like it up here in New Hampshire, or are you?
Yeah, that's why I'm here, because I like it. I wouldn't stay here if I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, like it's a place like anywhere else. Like it has its pros and its cons, but like I've come to love this part of the world and the people in it. I've made a home here. I put roots down here. Yeah, this is where I call home. I love it. Even the weather, which people complain about, but like growing up in Atlanta, it's hot all the time. And it's no different up here. Like there's a couple of months out of the year you just don't want to go outside. And it's the same down south. It's just a different part of the calendar.
That's why I like living up here, because we get all 4 seasons. And my favorite season is the very end of summer and fall, where it's kind of hot.
My favorite is spring, because we don't have one in Atlanta. It literally goes from like cool, cold to like hot. Like the pools are open in like April.
Yeah.
And it's still snowing up here sometimes in April. It's crazy.
Yeah. Let me see. So we actually met at a George Floyd protest. It was supposed to be a candlelight vigil, but it ended up being a small gathering, I'd say. With so many Black men and women being murdered by the police, and what happened with the Capitol recently, what is your opinion on like how differently that the Black community and the protesters that were along with the Black community protesting in 2020, how they were treated, and how the people at the Capitol were treated?
So for me, it was very traumatic, actually. The restraint that law enforcement showed during that entire situation, like, bothered me a lot. Like, not that I wanted to see anything happen to people, because I definitely don't. Like, regardless of who they are, like, life is precious. That's my belief, and that is like the whole premise of like Black Lives Matter, is that like no one life is worth more than another. So like for me, it's really important to make that distinction, that like just because, you know, there were people that died at in that situation, whatever you want to call it, riot, terrorist act, whatever. You know, like there were people that lost their lives, and those lives are precious. And to me, I don't even make the distinction about like their political beliefs, because like when somebody dies and it's a brown person or a black person, like I'm offended when people talk about like the last thing they tweeted, or like what, you know, like their criminal history, or like
Yeah.
none of that matters to me when somebody is has lost their life. And then like when I see people that, you know, I share convictions with saying those same things, like it bothers me. So like I feel like it's really important that like if we are supposed to have like a moral high ground, that we don't take the low road when it's people that don't agree with us in caskets, you know? So like, um, I didn't want to see anybody get hurt, but like I was like, at first I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen? Because I am so used to seeing like when conflict happens between law enforcement and protesters, because usually it's not the people in the majority or in power that are protesting. It's the
Yeah.
people. It's not because there's like a transition of power. It's usually people that are oppressed or marginalized protesting, and the way that the police treat them is, in my opinion, so abhorrent. Like when I saw this happening, like I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen? And then not very much happened,
Yeah.
and I was shocked, and it was traumatic. Like, oh, so the police do know how to use restraint,
Yeah.
you know? And like the images that I saw and have seen over the last couple of years between like conflicts between like protesters and the police, and what I saw on January the 6th, were just very, very different. There were police stepping aside. There were police like backing up. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? There were police like trying to have conversations with people
Yeah. Taking
instead
selfies.
of just taking selfies instead of just using force. And yeah, it was traumatic. It was like, it was just, so like I'm used to seeing those conflicts, those clashes between minorities, black people, and the police, and like that's almost expected at this point for me. I did not expect what I saw in on January the 6th to happen the way it did, and that was more jarring. Like it was a lot less violent than I think I expected it to be, which I felt was a good thing. But at the same time, like I was just not prepared emotionally to see the police exercise so much restraint. And it was upsetting. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
like it
yeah.
was triggering for me. It was really triggering for me, because like I started to relive some of those images that I've seen in the past where, you know, like law enforcement are staring down a black person with a small girl on their shoulders, you know what I'm saying, with like guns maybe filled with rubber ammunition, but nonetheless like
Yeah.
being aggressively in confrontation to like people who are clearly peacefully protesting. And then to see like this violent mob rioting and, you know, defacing like institutions that like
Yeah.
we as a country traditionally have held sacred, like buildings that like are emblematic of like those institutions. And then, you know, to see them desecrated, to see people walk through the halls of those buildings like with Confederate flags, or you know, and then reports afterward, the things that I've heard, it's just like, you know, they beat a man to a police officer to death with a fire extinguisher. They defaced the Capitol building with feces. Like the things that they
Yeah.
did, like I can't help but see those things and be traumatized by them, because I know without a doubt, had those people
Mm-hmm.
not been mainstream, had been marginalized, had been different, they would not have been treated that way. And I know that. Like I can't
Oh,
prove to you a hypothetical, but like I know it.
me
So it's
too.
traumatic. It's traumatic for me. It is.
It's very traumatic because we can look at what they did at the Cap in Washington, just DC. We can look and see what they did in DC when they tried when he wanted to go over and take that picture with the Bible, how they cleared everybody out with tear gas and rubber bullets and horses and it was aggressive. And it's just insane to see the contrast of how the people
And I mean,
stormed the
yeah,
Capitol,
and
violently stormed the Capitol,
yeah,
and
and if you go ahead.
to do harm to our elected officials.
Yeah. And like I forget the lady's name that they killed at like a checkpoint in DC when she was going through the Capitol building like not too long ago. I forget her name. I'm horrible with names. You know, and like to see like all over this country, like the protests that have been going on by conservatives, right-wing politically affiliated people with like militias, and the way they were treated in DC at the seat of our nation, at its capital, as though nobody saw it coming. I mean, to me, it feels like a conspiracy.
Oh,
It seems like an inside job. Like nobody who's been paying attention to what's going on in this country since, I don't know, Sarah Palin was the Republican vice presidential nominee, to like the Tea Party movement, to the birthers, to like Trump, to like everything that's going on in this country, hasn't seen the rhetoric and the violence escalate
yeah.
over the last decade or so. And for it to happen and they not be prepared for that kind of violence, and then unprepared to see how they reacted, was even more egregious, because that's not human nature. When you're unprepared and your back is against the wall, usually that heightens situations.
Yeah.
It doesn't lead to a de-escalation of conflict. But to see it happen when the people that were protesting were conservative and white, it was upsetting, to say the least. I'm happy that not more people lost their lives, but no less upsetting.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Like, obviously, we don't want people to be hurt and murdered, but just the difference in how they were treated to how, like I said, how we can compare just how the people who protested in DC were treated to compare to, how they were treated when they went for statues. How, some of the people who, were tearing down statues, how they were treated compared to how these people were treated storming our Capitol and going after, to me, it's like going after our elected officials. And we're just lucky that they were able.
It's just insult after insult to me, honestly. Like, if you look at what happened in Wisconsin, like the guy that murdered like 3 people in the street is on bail, like walking around free. Like, that is how we treat marginalized people in this country. And like, when you're white and you're conservative and there's no equal protection under the law. Like, we don't honor our 14th Amendment. Like, that is hurtful. It hurts me. Like, I could choose to be angry about it, but like at its core, like, it's hurtful. I'm not being treated fairly. I'm not being treated as a citizen. Like, I'm being disenfranchised by this country and the way they treat minorities and marginalized people. And it's really sad. It's really sad. Makes me sad.
I almost feel like I'm a little bit not angry at myself, but I've always said, I know that there is a white nationalism and racists who are in law enforcement, but to see how many law enforcement people who were there in the crowd and helped storm that building, it made me it was jarring to me, because it made me feel like I was naive to how bad it really is.
I don't know that I could say I was naive about it. I mean, it wasn't surprising. And like, the thing is, like, we're still like, this is going to be a story that that has legs. Like, we're going to be finding things out about what happened that day for a long time. And like, it's still happening because that transition of power has not been completed. There's still an inauguration that's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen then? And not just in DC. So like, I can't say that I'm shocked by it. I am disappointed by it, but like, my hope is that like the people who I align myself with don't use this as an opportunity to take the low road, because I just feel like really that doesn't help us. It doesn't help our cause. And like, you know, like, if I was to be called an Uncle Tom, it would crush me. But like, I literally like don't want to see people get hurt, and I don't want to see like us use the same tactics that they do to further our agenda. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want us to be divisive to further our agenda. I feel like that is why so many, because like I live in New Hampshire, and like I have a ton of white people in my network, and I am friends with these people. Like, we talk about these issues, and I know why they stopped listening. It's because of that kind of rhetoric. It's because we talk more about our differences than we do about our similarities. We don't honor how it negatively affects them in ways that isn't portrayed or even recognized sometimes. Like, the thing is, like, discrimination and racism affects all of us negatively. And yes, it disproportionately affects Black people as victims, or as the object of that discrimination, but it affects all of us. You know, like, we're like, it's not a mystery. Like, diversity is one of our greatest assets as a nation, like in the workplace, in our communities. And like, when we allow white supremacy or these like ideas of bigotry and hate to divide us and separate us, like, it weakens all of us. And like, yeah, like, I could point out how it affects me personally or affects my family personally, and those, you know, those are valid things to bring up and voice. But I never, for myself, I don't want that to be the central idea that I convey to an audience that doesn't look like me.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that furthers my cause.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to how we talked about how we met at a George Floyd event. How do you think his murder changed things? Because his murder seemed to be, I mean, there's been so many people who have been lynched and murdered by police over the years, but his murder seemed like an inflection point where some people who were not Black or people of color opened some eyes. Some people who were allies didn't necessarily 100% realize what was going on. They'd been told a million times, but seeing that situation changed some minds. How do you think that inflection point has changed things, or has it changed it enough?
So this is maybe where I divert a little bit from where most people on our side of the issue. I mean, like, so I don't think that George Floyd was particularly, I mean, it was a pivotal moment for a lot of people, but it wasn't for me, right? Like, this whole Black Lives Matter thing, like, even like, I was Black Lives Matter before it was a thing. Like, I held these beliefs before Trayvon Martin was murdered. You know, like, I held these beliefs before these ideas came into the forefront. And I think like it was just a timing thing with that. I think that, you know, there was a very impactful emotional side to that tape because of the length of time that it happened because he pleaded for his mother, because of just when it happened in history. You
Yeah.
know, like it wasn't the first instance,
Nope.
it was an egregious one that happened when people were already sick of it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of those kinds of cases that get ignored all
Oh
the
yeah.
time. But that was one when everybody seemed to be ready to ignore that they couldn't ignore, because it was documented on, because like we literally got to watch him die, be murdered while it was being recorded, because of how egregious it was, because it was the police, it was the state itself murdering this man. Um, it was just like a kind of a perfect storm, you
Hmm.
know, for a lot of people. It wasn't for me, but it was for a lot of people. And like I'm not gonna look a gift horse in its mouth. Like I'm
Yeah.
appreciative that you know, what has come from it, but I personally don't feel like martyrs, like I don't feel like it honors him to make him a martyr. I feel like if martyrdom changed the world, it would already be a better place.
Yeah.
I feel like the conversations that we can have around that with the people in our lives, like not just like statements I can make on a media platform,
Yeah.
but like recently I've started using my Facebook profile picture to like put people who are like emblematic of Black Lives movement, of the Black Lives Matter movement, like because like those, like I live with that all the time. And like the people in my life that know me and care about me, I want them to understand that I identify these with these people, and it's not just when they're in the headlines, that that reality is with me, you
Yeah.
know? So like, does that conversation happen if George Floyd isn't murdered in front of all of us? Probably not, you know? So like it is a big deal in that sense, but like it's not about him. It's not about any one of these
Yeah.
instances. It's not about the character of the person that's being lost. It's that like no life is worth more than another. And like at some point they're like for like regardless of like what you believe, like the numbers are overwhelming. Like it happens every day. And like the conversation I want to have is that it doesn't just happen to us, it just happens disproportionately to us. Like police abuse their power all the time, and
Oh yeah.
not just against Black people, it just happens to us disproportionately. And people should care about it because it's wrong, not just because it happens to Black people, and not just when it happens to white people. They should
Hmm.
care because it's wrong,
Yeah. Oh,
you
I
know?
fully
And
agree
like
with that.
the better we treat the least of ours in this world, the better we all get treated, you know? Like if there's just like if there's justice for all of us, then the world is a better place.
Yep. When we did the research for the event that we were at,
Mhm.
I found a website that listed everybody who had been murdered by the police or had died by the hand of a police officer. And Kimberly and I talked about it. We were just like, our minds were blown by the numbers. It was just the list, and it was only like a year's worth of people, and it was like I could not believe the amount of people who had died at the hands of cops. And it was jarring to look at the list,
Yeah.
just to look at the names. And I agree. That's why I tell people the things that the Black community want change in policing helps the whole community. You know,
Mhm.
cops not being aggressive and not shooting people. We don't want them to shoot white people either. We don't want them to shoot, you know, Latinx people. We don't want them to shoot natives. We don't want them to shoot anybody unless it's totally justified. You know, we don't want people dying in the streets, and it's not just the black community. The things we want changed will help everybody.
And like to me, what's saddest about it is like how many of those people that are white, are mainstream, how many of those people who are murdered are overlooked so that we can maintain like this white supremacist idea that the police are good. you know, like inherently. That not that like they're people and that each case should be like treated individually, but like that the idea that like when they do what they do, which is to uphold institutions that are racist and discriminatory, like how many of those are of those white people are murdered and receive no justice so that we can maintain that kind of lie. You know, to me that is tragic. To me that's what I would hope that the people that we need as allies see, so that we can affect the change that we want in the world around us and like make things better for everybody. But for me, especially for like for my community, for my family, for my children that have to live in a world where like this is a reality, you know, like I'm like a black person. I grew up in this country and like my parents would discipline me like physically because and like I don't blame them. You know why? Because like I could not afford to grow up in a world to live in a world where I didn't know how to sit down and shut up. Like because it could cost me my life.
Yes.
Whereas that is not the reality that my white friends deal with. That's not the world that they raise their children in. Like my kid, like I don't personally, I don't care like the Department of Family Services shows up in my house because like I have an obligation as a parent to protect my children's lives. And that means they have to know how to take authority. Like they aren't free to be like the same as their white friends. Like they like I have to teach them some things and some hard truths that other kids don't have to deal with. Other kids don't have, that's not their reality. And that's not fair. They're just children.
I,
They shouldn't have to, they shouldn't have the fear of God put in them by the time they've hit their hit puberty. But that is the truth. That's my truth. And like I won't argue with anybody because I know it to be reality.
yeah. What is your, you know, because there's the talk that all Black people, not supposedly, but a lot of us get when we're teenagers or growing up. So we know how to act in public and especially how to engage with the police. Did your family have the talk with you? Or was it just
No,
a
no,
ongoing conversation?
I didn't have to have the talk because like it was ingrained in me from as long as I can remember. Like my dad was born in 1944. He's still alive. Like he's in his 70s.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up in the deep South where the water that he wanted to drink out of a fountain in public was segregated,
Yeah.
where the Klan would parade down Main Street. He picked cotton on a farm where there was a white man with a shotgun. Like that was the world that he grew up in, and I am his child.
Yeah.
So
you knew.
I was never under the impression that things weren't the way that they were. I didn't have to, like, I never had that illusion. It was not afforded to me because there was kind of like he was older when he had me. So like my dad is like a lot of my peers the same age as their like around the same generation as their grandparents. So like I grew up in a world where like racism was super prevalent in his mind, and like he shaped me because he was my parental figure, you know. So like there was never a talk, it was understood. It was always understood that that was the reality because my dad grew up in the deep South, you know, in the 40s and 50s, you know. And it's a very different world than what most people even realize. Like I think a lot of people think that these things happened a long time ago, and they don't have very much empathy for the plight of marginalized people today because it seems like so long ago. But for me, in my reality, it wasn't. It was like my great grandparents, like my great grandparents were slaves, you know. Like my grandmother was the first person in my dad's side of the family with a college degree, you know, and she didn't get, she graduated the same time as one of my aunts, you know what I'm saying, as an older like as a non-traditional student, you know. Like there were you know, like my father's generation was the first one that, you know, came out of poverty essentially, you know. So like that's just, I don't know, that's just my reality. I think and it's interesting that like the name of your show, like there's this idea of like what it is to be Black, and like it's just inconsistent with the reality for me and for with so many Black people. Like I'm mixed, right? Like my mom's Sri Lankan and British, and my dad's African American, and like I've never been Black enough for the Black people, and clearly I don't have the complexion to be white, but like, you know, my authenticity on that front has been questioned. But I use like the like the traffic stop test. Like, am I Black at a traffic stop?
Yeah.
And yes, I'm Black, you know, and like that is how much diversity we have in our community. You know, you go from people that are super fair skinned and come from mixed cultural backgrounds to like people whose families come from poverty and right out of slavery and like are still dealing with a lot of those traumas like firsthand all the time in their communities. So I mean, I don't know, I just it I try and voice these things because I feel like I have the ability to articulate them in
Yeah.
ways that people understand, because like even if you didn't have a voice or didn't have the words to articulate it, like it's your reality if you're like me.
And that's why I started my show. And actually the where we met, the reason why I started my show, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I'm disabled, I get really bad migraines, so I can't, and I have some other health issues, so I can't, when there's protests, I can't go walking and do all that. So I wanted to be able to, you know, voice my opinions and also have other people join me and voice their opinions, and so I can show people that everybody's different and not everybody is what everybody thinks is a stereotype. And the reason why I actually named it A Mixed Girl in a Mixed Up World was because I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And then when I came up with this, I was like, oh, I'm a mixed girl. Okay. You know, like mixed girl in a mixed up world. I was like, oh, that's a good name. I was like, so, you know, I'll say on all my things, you know, my dad is Black, you know, my same thing. My great grandmother was a slave. I just sent my father for his 75th birthday a picture of her, my great grandmother who was a slave. I met my great grandmother. You know, she was born like three years maybe after slavery ended, so she was very close to being a slave.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like you said, it in our families, it's so, people say, oh, it was so long ago. Yeah, but when you're saying in a couple generations, it's not that far. It's not that far for us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it affects, you know, how it affects how, like you said, how your father raised you, what his opinions and his life experiences shaped how you are. Same with me. Like my dad growing up, my family growing up in Massachusetts, you know, my dad dealing with, you know, racism from up in this area now. So and that's what. So that's
and there's a lot of it. And there's a lot of it. Just to throw back to your original question, there's a lot of it. Like when I came up here, like there are a lot of white people that don't think racism is an issue in this part of the country. And it is so far from the truth. And I can tell you that because I've experienced racism in the Deep South. And it's different, but it is no less prevalent. And in many ways, it's worse up here because at least the white people in the South know they're racist. Like sometimes white people in New England can be just as racist, but be completely unaware and like completely unapologetic. And like like they have no shame about it because they don't believe it's a thing or that it exists or it's something that they're capable of participating in and predicating. And like it's no less harmful, you know, it's no less, not in the aggregate, it's no less impactful, you know, just because you didn't say it with a twang or you used a different vocabulary or, you know what I'm saying? Like it's no less impactful on the lives of people.
I fully agree with that. Especially growing up here, I dealt with a lot of stuff growing up in school, so I fully agree with that. And sometimes people don't, because they don't. So I think some people say things that they don't realize are racist. But there are some people who are flat out racist and they know they're being racist.
Mm.
But there are some people who say things like microaggressions that they might not realize. And I don't think that's why, one reason why I'm doing the show too, because I want people to know what sometimes they say is messed up.
Yeah. And I mean, so I'm a logophile, I'm a lover of words, and like, so there is often a lot of confusion around these ideas because of the language that we use. And part of that is highlighted by the difference of being like from the South and like living up here. But even like in the way we make distinctions between like racism and bigotry, you know, like we use them synonymously when they're actually different things. Like institutions are racist, right? They discriminate against people. They have the power to um, to be racist.
Yeah.
Like a individual can be bigoted. They can have like beliefs that are like wrong or whatever, but they don't have the power to discriminate against me on an institutional level, which is what racism is. And like, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Like, I'll talk about race with my friends. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're not. And we talk about racist as though like that's what people have the power to do. And then like my white friends will understandably get defensive when they're called racist, because in reality, they don't have that kind of power. They could be bigoted,
Yeah.
they could be ignorant, they could discriminate, they could do a lot of things, but then when you call them racist and they don't feel racist, even if they don't understand what those words mean, they don't feel like they have that power. So they reject what I'm telling them based on those feelings that are valid. So like, to me, it's important, like even in my conversation with you, to like, and I know that I've said those words like in ways that I wouldn't want them dissected later on, but like to make the distinction for me that like institutions are racist. In my mind, institutions are racist. Like, people can't be racist, they can be bigoted, they can discriminate, they can do all kinds of horrible things, but like racism is an institutional problem. It's a systemic problem that we have as a community, and that like it's not it's not only on white people to fight. Like, and this is something I want to talk about, like I as a black person have privilege. Like, if I can't acknowledge that, then how is it fair for a white, like how is it fair for me to expect a white person to like, and I'm not equating my privilege as a black person to a white person's privilege as a white person. But if I can't acknowledge mine and all I do is talk about the privilege that white people have, then of course they're going to reject those ideas, because it's not fair. And like, people inherit, like they want to be treated fairly, and I don't blame them, because that's why I'm here, because I want to be treated fairly.
Yeah.
So of course, in my mind, like of course they're going to reject these ideas because they're not being treated fairly by us, which is why I think it's important to like recognize and mourn the loss of those people who died in the Capitol on the 6th. Not because I agree with them, not because of their last tweets, or because, you know, they share my political ideology, but because like the whole idea of this is that life is sacred. The whole idea of this is that like we deserve to be treated fairly.
Yeah.
And like, it's not okay. It would make me a hypocrite to not treat my white, and they're my friends, like not treat my white friends fairly. And even the language that I use, you know, like because sometimes I say it jokingly, sometimes I say it deadpan seriously. I tell them about their privilege as white people. But like, for me, it's important to recognize that I have privilege, because like I come from a mixed background, and my mother speaks the Queen's English, and my parents are educated. My dad has a master's degree and worked as a professional his entire life, at least the whole life that I knew him.
Yeah.
And like, that provides me some privilege. Like, moving up here was a blessing for me, because I come from a place with, it's just an ocean of black people. And because New England is racist, when I walk in, I stand out. People have these preconceived notions of what I'm expected to be, and it's really easy to impress them. And it's really easy to impress them because they think poorly of black people, right?
Yeah.
So like, that provides me privilege. Like, it doesn't benefit the vast majority of Black people. It just benefits me. So like, that is privilege that I have. And like, I am willing to acknowledge it, because I feel like if we could all acknowledge these things, it would make it easier for us to change the system. Like, racism is an institutional problem. I am a part of these institutions. I hold some responsibility for what happens in society because I am a member of it. Yes, I'm a marginalized member of society. Yes, I may not have the control or influence that other people do, but I still benefit from it, you know? And like, when I'm benefiting from the protection of the police and then the police do something abhorrent, like, I have an obligation to speak up against it, because like, I am a part of these institutions, and like, it is on me too, you know, like, and that's why I speak up. That's why I try and be a voice for change, because it weighs on me, you
Yeah.
know, because like, I have a good job, because I have a college degree, because like, I have participated in these institutions that, and benefit from these institutions that disproportionately treat marginalized folks really unfairly. And like, there are so many people that look like me and come from my cultural background that don't have the opportunities that I have, that get lost in the system, that, you know, the way the criminal justice system treats us, the way the courts treat us. Like, yeah, I'm really lucky. Like, I come from a family that loves me and supports me, and my parents gave me every opportunity to succeed. And like, it has benefited me in many ways being a Black person, but in the same way that it's benefited me, it is hurt, damaged, depressed, whatever you want to call it, so many other people. And like, I benefit from these things. And like, it's not, I don't want to demonize people, you know? I want us to all see our part in this, and like, together decide like, we can do better. We can do better. We don't have to be this way. And it doesn't have to be about color. It has to be like, of the individual involved. It just has to be enough of us who are parts of these institutions to say like, look, this is wrong, and we don't have to keep doing it this way anymore. We
Yeah,
can change. We can change how we operate.
I agree. I fully agree with that. It's not going to change until we all try to make it change, and we have to work together. That's why this summer I was part of the movement that had happened this summer. I was happy to see so many people that weren't Black engaging in what had happened, because we were finally having conversations that we weren't having. And I think it opened up some dialogue. We still have a long way to go. And especially with what happened at the Capitol, showed like the other extreme of that, that, whoa, we all knew it was there. We knew it was bubbling under the surface, but it still was, jarring to see how bad it was
Yeah.
then. So it's like, we need to find ways of communicating better and coming together and understanding each other better.
I don't know. I just, like, it's been difficult with this whole Capitol thing. Like, since this summer, like, I've been doing the thing where like, Black Lives Matter, like, victims, I've been posting their picture as my Facebook profile. And last week sometime, or maybe it was early this week, well, it's Sunday, so it would have been last week. I posted Ashley Babbitt, who was the woman that was shot at the Capitol building. And I did it because I felt like she lost her life because of ignorance. She lost her life because of hatred. She lost her life because of bigotry. And I felt like she deserved to be one of those people, she deserved to be one of those people that I posted as my Facebook profile, because like, I could identify, like, I've been a victim of those things, and I could identify, like, it hasn't cost me my life, but like, the reason I post those pictures, because I could identify with how it's affected those people. And like, even though she comes from a different background and has different belief, or had different beliefs, like, she is no less a victim of that kind of thinking of like white supremacy. And like, that is like, she is part of the cost, like, of her life is part of that cost. And like, I got so much pushback from my liberal friends about like, that I was like comparing her loss to, you know, like the George Stinneys of the world and the Emmett Tills of the world and the Trayvons of the world and like these names and the George Floyds of the world. And, you know, like I got pushback, and like, I think it's important that we have these hard conversations among ourselves, because like the thing is, like, chances are there's going to be some white conservative people that watch this, but more people are going to be liberal, and more people are going to be the kind of people that agree with us. And I feel like it's important to have those conversations amongst ourselves, that like we can't afford to alienate these white people. We need these people as our allies. Like nobody,
Mhm.
I don't know anybody. I'm definitely not trying to lose my life in some kind of race war to change things. Like that is not what I want to see happen, because like I look at my life here as in New Hampshire and New England as like missionary work. Like I am here amongst these savages trying to share my culture and humanize my experience, like my like where I'm from, so that like when they find themselves in situations, they have a real person to identify with, and like maybe have some compassion or empathy when they're making decisions that could negatively affect somebody else that looks like me, you know, like. And it's just really important that like I don't give them a cop out, you know, like I can't claim the moral high ground and then take the low road. It's just
Yeah,
not
I agree
okay,
with that. Yeah.
you know. And like I just think it's super important for us who are like woke to like hold each other accountable, because if the other side did that, we wouldn't be in this mess. If like if when like if they weren't so willing to look the other way when bad things happen because it doesn't affect them personally, or it's not their kin
Yeah.
that are suffering, like if they didn't have that willingness, it wouldn't be as bad as it is. And I don't want to be guilty of that. I don't want to like celebrate people losing their lives.
Yeah. No, yeah.
You know, I don't want to celebrate like the pain, the real cost of this, because there are people that are going to commit suicide rather than face the charges of being in that Capitol building. And they have families, they have children, they have siblings, they have parents, and like their loss is real. It's not just based on how like I wish they could identify with all those other Black Lives Matters victims that I put on my profile pic the way I could identify with Ashley. You know, even though like we disagree on so many things, like her life was precious. Like there's no coming back from that. It's important. Like I can mourn that even if I disagree with like her political beliefs
Yeah.
or like her cultural stance on issues that we disagree on.
That's good. I mean, it's good to have that view where you believe that all life matters.
You know, I said that. I got upset and I snapped at somebody on my comment section, because I was like, dude, like if the idea is no, like all lives matters when Black lives matters, then Black lives don't matter unless her life matters.
Yeah.
Like that's my belief, is that like it goes both ways. Like we
Oh,
can't have it one way and not the other.
it was just weird what I was going to say, because I was
I
like,
know, I heard you say it and
I'm
I
like,
actually
wait a minute,
wrote it
it's coming out. It feels
down
weird
earlier.
coming out. But
Yeah.
I agree. I don't like what she did. I don't like what she stood for. I don't agree with her views. But like you said, her life matters. We're all living beings, and we all deserve to be able to live. And because of hatred and ignorance, somebody's life shouldn't be taken. And there were other people, like there was a girl who was trampled.
Mhm.
And
And some of those people went there to peacefully protest. I
yeah,
have no doubt about it. Like, and a lot of those people, most of those people, believe the lies that they've been told. They're not as bad as we could paint them out to be just because of where they were and what they were doing. Like, they're misinformed. You know, they are very much, you know, I have a lot of empathy for them. Like they know not what they do sometimes, you know, and like they deserve, I feel like they deserve my empathy. Like I feel I mourn them. I really do. Like it's sad, and like it's upsetting that it wasn't worse, because had they been Black, I'm confident, or brown, I'm confident it would have been. but it's no less tragic because like it's all based on this idea of like white supremacy, and it's just wrong, it's evil, it's bad. Like we should fight it on every front, not just the ones that affect us.
Yeah. And if I think if more people had conversations, um, they would discover that we are more alike than we aren't. I don't know if I said that right. And we could be able to empathize with each other more. You know, yes, we all have cultural differences and we were raised differently. Even like, you know, you were raised in Atlanta, I was raised in New Hampshire. So we have where we're our regions, those things. People would understand that we're more alike than we are not. You know, we're all humans. First of all, we're all humans. We all live and breathe. We all get dressed and put our pants on the same way. So it's like we're more alike than we're not.
Yeah, and it just like all of that supremacy and bigotry, like it just preys on the on our lowest impulses, like our fears. um it's very, very much driven by fear, and like I try and like be as brave as I can in the face of that, and like not succumb to those same impulses. Like I don't think those people are bad. They're just afraid, and they're being peddled fear by people who would profit from it, whether it be monetarily or in power. And like I just stand against that. I stand up to it. I when I see it, I say something about it, and like I fight against it because that's the good fight to me.
Yeah. Um, well, we're almost at the end of our time. So is there anything else you want to express or make sure people hear from you?
Um, I mean, I slipped in quite a bit of the things that I wanted to talk about, but I will say that like I just like the way I live my life is like I like this is as public a platform as I've probably ever engaged in. But like I really try and have these conversations with the people that know me the best,
Mm-hmm.
because like I in my personal life, like I have a lot of friends who I'm the only Black person they know and have ever befriended.
Yeah.
And like it's important to have those conversations with those people. It's important not to, for me at least, not to unfriend people in my social network that don't agree with me. Like I think it's important to keep those channels of communications open, to have those hard conversations, to like take that high road and maintain that moral high ground, um, and like put a real face. Like George Floyd is important, but like in the people in my life, I want to be an actual face that they know and they
Yeah.
care about, and that has done like been a part of their lives for this movement, and like that's what I want to mostly say is that like that's the way that I try and make change in the world, to make the world a better place. And like the people who like share my convictions, like I would hope that that's the way that they try and change the world too, because like martyrs, I guess they serve their purpose, but like if they made the world a better place, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Like
Yeah.
it's the grassroots, knocking on doors, shaking hands, like making friends. That's, I feel like, what will change the world and make it a better place.
And to go along with what you just said, that's why I'm doing this, because I want to put faces and names and experiences to what's going on, so people can look at you and all the other people I interview and speak to, say, hey, you know what, I can agree with him, I can empathize with him, I can see where he's coming from. So I want people to be able to understand how other people feel. So, and I definitely going to broaden my horizons and talk to all kinds of people. So
Well, I think it's a noble cause. I
thank,
congratulate you and encourage you in that, because I think that's what we need.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming on. It was a wonderful conversation. You're a wonderful interview. And everybody, make sure you like, share, and tell your friends to come and watch. And so, and thank you. I am Mizzy, and I'm a mixed girl in a mixed up world. You guys have a great day.
See ya.